Hi there, I've got the lovely Patrick Ebbs with me. Patrick is founder and managing director of ChangEnable, a consultancy which provides presentation skills training, outplacement services, career management, coaching, and facilitation services. Patrick is a qualified life coach, author, and has a Management MBA. He has devised and delivered many training programs and facilitated workshops throughout the UK and in Europe. He also mentors and coaches numerous clients. So thank you for being here, Patrick, and agreeing to speak to me. We've spoken about the fact that there's quite a link in some ways in our work, particularly in terms of confidence being the overall theme in your work in a way. Obviously, you deal more specifically with certain areas, but I've seen through my work, whether it's sort of helping someone with anxiety or depression often, or many other issues, that confidence or lack of underpins many of the problems that we have in life. And so I was wondering from your perspective, how you see that issue of confidence, being a problem for people. And if you could just expand on that, please.
Certainly. Good morning, Anne. I'm delighted to be here. Yes, in terms of confidence, when we come to presentation skills or interviews, for example, they're big examples of where people lack the confidence. I mean, they say people fear doing a speech more than practically anything in life. It's really, so they have to overcome the fear. But if anyone comes through my workshops or does it anywhere, in fact, and they become confident in it, you can see the changes. Like if I do, sometimes I do sessions that would go over, say, 3 to 6 months in companies. We do it just once a week. And you can see the transformation of people into confidence. Some are reluctant to join the session because, oh, no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't stand up in front of people and speak. I'd never do that. And some do, they sign up, and some say, I don't want to speak, I just want to observe, which is fine. It's a happy learning environment. So whatever way they want to do. And then we eventually, if you like, cajole them or influence them to eventually stand up. And it's when they do that, yeah, they sometimes perhaps don't do a not so good presentation, but hey, that's why they're here to learn. But over the time, you can see the transformation in their, not just their delivery, but it all gets down to confidence. They've got the confidence to stand up and actually do and deliver a presentation. That maybe only 3 to 5 minutes, but for them, that's a huge transformation in their life. And the feedback is always, even when they're just having, interactions in work with they are much more confident. They think about what they're going to say, but not only what they're going to say, but how they're going to say it. So they definitely grow in confidence. And with interviews as well, sometimes I have clients come to me and they've been in the same job for 20, 30 years, and now they're going to change, and they kind of absolutely fear an interview, don't even know what the whole process is. So for them, again, we do mock interviews. And again, it's about having the confidence to actually go and sell yourself, because the other candidates will sell themselves. So, but again, after a lot of practice, you can see the transformation of these people. So it is very much, and unfortunately, presentation skills today, being able to speak in public is a life skill that is really necessary now in the modern world we live in. So for people to avoid that, they really need to consider, like, I need to be able to do this. But when they actually do it, I remember there was a chap, he was a very nervous chap, and he was on our course. And then I met him some months later, and he said he was at this party at the weekend. It was his grandmother's 80th birthday. And they suddenly said, right, can you say a few words? Now, he said, I stood there, he said, and I absolutely, gave a lovely little speech about my grandmother. He says, 6 months ago, I couldn't have done that. I would have shied away from that. And he says, it was then I realized how I'd grown in confidence, not also being able to put a couple of words together, but he said it was the confidence I could stand there and feel part of that and say, I'm making a contribution here, and, I got a nice round of applause. So he could see that the change in his life just from the presentation skills, but not so much the presentation skills, but being able to develop and grow in his confidence. I remember there was a young girl who came to me, and she was it was about confidence for her. It was an interview skills. And I remember she was telling me about, she went to I think it was a shop or something, and she tried to make small talk with the cashier, who basically ignored her. So she went back again and she said, no, I'm going to try this. I'm going to go back and, have another go, shall we say. And the same thing happened. Now, the way she reflected on that was, first of all, she was saying, okay, she started to say, my communication strategy is not working. I'm not getting my message across just to say hello to this person. Why are they ignoring me? Or I need to change my approach. Or, I learned from this experience and perhaps do it a different way. But she was saying, before like our interview sessions and where she'd grown and come, she would have said, oh, she's rude and arrogant. I think she's a moron, basically, or I feel crushed by this rejection, or just kind of my confidence depends on this person liking me. But now our whole attitude towards it was actually, yeah, she's probably having a bad day, hey ho, and just move on. So again, that was kind of the way she reflected on matters in life now. So it's not just, the interview skills or presentation. You can take that into your everyday life. So confidence, as I said, is so important. Yeah. And it's obviously it's an area you touch on. Yeah.
So confidence is often about the fear what other people will see in you or the judgments that they will make of you, isn't it? And that for a lot of people seems to be one of the biggest obstacles to overcome. Is there anything that you might say to somebody or help them through a technique in order to overcome that particular aspect?
Yeah, in terms of like, for example, with presentations or interviews, I mean, people tend, because they're nervous, they don't sell themselves as best they should. So they kind of don't do a good job, and they're aware of that. So to be able to do that, first of all, I always say three things: preparation, 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 and to really be ready for it. And kind of, because at interviews, people say, oh, I don't know what questions they're going to ask me. But, you can anticipate the type of question you will be asked and almost have your answers prepared for that. But for people, it's like, or a presentation, they say, oh, they can't string three words together, or they're so nervous, they'll either, should we say, they'll say, like I've just said, they'll say, and ah, so it doesn't come across very confidently, or they'll speak too fast. And of course, speaking too fast, people will try and stay with you, but in fact, they then just kind of switch off. So the kind of tips we give them is, first of all, to try and eliminate the ums and ahs. In fact, in terms of confidence, we ask them to stand, if they're giving a presentation, or even if it's an interview, obviously you'd be sitting, but for an interview, for example, it's going in, when you shake hand, have a really firm handshake, make great contact, and appear confident. And as we say with presentations as well, when giving a presentation, everyone is nervous. Even the top athletes, they want to be nervous because they use that as the adrenaline to make them perform better. As I say, like, it's having the butterflies, but having them flying in formation. So it actually G's you to do a good job. What we say is you stand at the top of the room if you're going to speak to a number of people, and just pause. So just take them in, nice smile, and then open welcome arm, welcome everybody. And then they immediately see you as a confident person. Now, you're probably an absolute nervous wreck on the inside, but they don't see that. So you've started, and then it's to try and eliminate the filler words, the ums and the ahs and the obviously and you like, because that becomes irritating. And when people start to, it's the awareness of it. When you say to someone, you need to try, we don't say eliminate completely on your next speech. We say, if you said 20 ums and ahs, try and say 10 next time, then reduce it. But it's amazing. Once you give that feedback, they're aware of it. For the first time, they're actually aware. Oh my gosh, I didn't say that. Yes, you did. So we try and cut that back. It's also then the pause. So when they speak, normally what happens is when they're nervous, if they try and pause, the room goes silent. And of course, they become nervous. Oh my God, I need to fill this. Usually it's with an and an ah. But we say, no, just pause. And because the advantage of that is, firstly, it gives you time to kind of catch your breath. It gives you time to think about what you're going to say next, but also it gives the audience time to consider and reflect on what you've just said. They may just say, oh, that's a good point. Yeah. But if you're carrying on, they later say, oh, and then what happens is the audience switch off. So again, having that pause, and of course, having that pause comes across as being confident. So these are the little tips we give them as they go through their speeches. And it's the same with an interview. Even as I say, in interviews, it's kind of having the pause. You're allowed pause to consider your answer. You don't have to rush in. It's not a test of, how quickly you can answer the question. It's the response you actually give. So that they're the kind of tips we give in terms of growing confidence. And then you find that when they go to do their second mini presentation, they're almost slapping themselves when they say an and an ah. So they're immediately conscious of it, which is great. Suddenly being aware of it means they can now do something about it. So they're the things which we don't expect them to do overnight. Or we say, if you've said lots and lots of ums and ahs, start working on them, then work on your pause. But my tip is always never be afraid of the silence. When you're actually speaking, believe it or not, silence is power. You come across so confident when you're able to stand there, make a really, one of your important points in your presentation, and then just stop, pause, take in your audience. And of course, you welcome them using nice gestures. What some people do, they'll fold their arms. And of course, by folding arms, that's seen sometimes as being, defensive. So, be aware, again, at interview, folding your arms seems defensive. So and how you sit for an interview, for example, nice posture, then start to move forward in the desk as the interview goes on. Yeah, I really want this job. So there's those sort of tips which help. And as we say, you'll never overcome nerves. You almost want those nerves to be there, but be in control of them. Where you start off, you're a nervous wreck. Oh, I don't know what to do. I forgot what I'm going to say. But then you have the nerves and think, great, I'm up for this now. I'm pumping. I'm going to give a good performance. It helps your performance. And as I say, if you ask any top athlete, they will tell you that, yeah, if they hadn't got nerves, they would be almost concerned about the performance they're going to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's interesting, isn't it, that when you bring the awareness to, let's say, the ums and the ahs, that you can actually begin to firstly become aware of them yourself, because you're not initially, but also then to begin to stop them. So when I first started making YouTube videos, my husband would film me because he used to be a photographer and a videographer. And he would point out to me, you're umming and you're ahhing. And I was like, am I really? And you probably hear this story so many times. And you're so right. But it's also practice. And I think it's interesting that, we know in life that if we practice something, we're going to get better at it. So, for instance, if we want to learn a musical instrument, well, we've got to practice it. If we want to learn a new sport, we've got to practice it, etc. But when it comes to either interview skills or presentation type skills or any sort of public speaking, we don't practice it, and then we just think we're rubbish at it.
Absolutely.
So do you advise people to go away in any types of situation and practice, those, whether it's with a friend or a family member, do you say to them, run through your presentation, or even just to a teddy bear or a cushion, just at least run through?
Absolutely, Anne. As I say, when I talk to people, I say there's three things you do: preparation, preparation, preparation. And for some people, they write their speech. And of course, the written word is different than the spoken word. So also when you write your speech, think about when you're saying it. And if you want, initially, when you want, you can highlight key points. I've got to emphasize this. Or, a big mark, this has got to be a pause. I've got to pause to help them through that. But you're right, it's to say it and say it and say it. And to not try and not rely. I mean, people sometimes they basically read the speech first time. Now, they say a read speech is a dead speech because there's no contact with the audience. But at the same time, my view is if you need to read it for a speech, read it and then start to move away, or then have little notes or bullet points, because you will be much more engaging with your audience. You'll look much more confident and more knowledgeable with the subject. But to start off with, write out your speech. As I say, mark it whichever way you want to do that, if that works for you, and then practice it with different people. Absolutely. And it's not just about, as I say, and again, I always hammer home to these people, it's not just what you say, but how you say it. Like, for example, the pausing, for example, the varying your pace. I would say if you listen to a commentator, if you don't, for example, horse racing, if you didn't understand anything about horse racing, but yet listen to the commentator, when things weren't really happening or when the exciting bit was coming by his voice, how he would vary his voice. If he was to do that in a monotone voice, the sport and listening, if you're on the radio, I'm talking about now, if you're listening on the radio, you kind of think, what's going on here? But it's getting to the finish line. Oh my gosh, it's really exciting. It's neck and neck. and it really gets exciting. So you can listen how they vary the pace of that. So again, it's working on the voice, working on the pause, having gestures, work on gestures, but then gestures should come natural. At the start, like a nice open welcome to, sorry, you can't see my hands, put your hands out, welcome, like palms up. Palms up is a very open, welcoming gesture. So to do that at the start, and then it's almost have some gestures in the speech, but then as you grow in confidence, the gestures will flow naturally with what you're saying. The fish was that big or that size, whatever. And again, all you're doing is enhancing the message, but not artificial, body language where, I was told to move my arm, so I'll do this for 10 minutes and I'm moving my arm typing. And all you're doing is irritating your audience. So absolutely, practice, even for interviews, and throw questions and think of all the questions. Because I always say, you're never over prepared for an interview. Sometimes they didn't ask me this and they didn't ask me about that. Yeah, but you would have been ready for it. And what you did answer was fantastic. So absolutely, I agree with you. Practice is my mantra. In fact, preparation. And because knowing your subject gives you confidence. I'm prepared for this. I know what I'm going to say. And the other thing I would say is for people to say, oh my God, I forgot half my sentences, or I forgot half a paragraph. But the audience don't know what you're going to say. They see you as the expert. So if you actually miss out 2 sentences or a point you were going to make, don't worry about it. Just carry on, because the audience don't know, and just carry on. And the other point I would make is that when you're giving a presentation, no matter where it is, the audience wants you to succeed. They're not there saying, oh, I hope this presentation Anne's going to give on well-being falls apart and I hope she falls off the stage. They're there because Anne's the expert on this subject. I'm going to learn lots from this. So they're rooting for you. So it's always bear that in mind. And the other thing I say to someone is visualize it. Visualize the interview or the presentation. Visualize it as you go in for the interview. You meet the employer. You hit it off straight away. Good warm handshake. He invites you in. You sit down. You sit confidently in the chair. You're ready. You look calm. You look composed. Absolutely nervous on the inside, but everything's going well. It's a huge success. And I always say, you've now done it once. Now go and do that again. And for some people, that really works. As you well know, everyone's an individual. So different techniques work for different people, but definitely preparation and practice for be it an interview or for a presentation. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it sounds like such an easy thing, but it is something that a lot of people don't do, and then they have the big flap and a panic when suddenly maybe they're asked to.
Absolutely,
because I've noticed lots of I sometimes get very successful business people in my studio who want to improve or sort of remove those nerves. These are people who are very high up in their organization, and on the face of it, no one would probably expect them to be at least a bit fearful of that public speaking. So anybody can, have a fear of public speaking. And for some people, it can be so intense. I mean, I've known people take, medication just to get through public speaking. So it can be so anxiety inducing. One other common denominator, you actually talked about a lot of common denominators in what I've seen with my clients, but another one is this fear that at the end maybe of your talk or partway through, someone's going to ask you a question and you're not going to know the answer to that question. And that is one of the biggest fears. I mean, what I tend to say to people is, if you don't know the answer, as long as you don't know the answer confidently, then all is fine. For instance, I say to them, well, you can say, I don't have that information or those facts right now, but I can get back to you later, or I will get somebody who knows that to get back to you, those sorts of things. So even it's good to be prepared for what you might not know, because someone might throw a curveball in that maybe isn't really your area, or it just is a curveball. And it's good to be prepared for something you don't know. Is there any advice you give people?
Yeah, well, I always say when we do a whole session on Q&A session, and I always say to people, if you're going to have a Q&A session, you've got basically 2 presentations. You've got your formal presentation, and then you've got the Q&A. Now the Q&A, you're right, somebody can, and sometimes there's always that one person who turns up to your workshop and wants to say, I've got loads of questions, I'm so knowledgeable, and they'll challenge you the whole time, which you've got to, you cannot be rude to them, because at the end of the day, the audience would be on your side. You know, if you've got someone who's really just being difficult in the room, the audience are with you. But if you start being rude to them, that will turn. They will say, yeah, the speaker shouldn't have done that, and they then support him. But the Q&A is, what I would say is, you kind of, again, most of the questions are going to be on your presentation. So kind of anticipate the questions that will come from your presentation and be prepared for them. So you've got your answers ready for them. The other point, of course, is if you don't know, absolutely put your hand up. If it's not a one-to-one, if it's a group of people, you can throw it out to the audience. Does anyone here have an answer to that? Just say, I'm not really sure about that. It's a really good question, but I don't have the answer now. I can get the answer for you and come back to you. Give me your email afterwards, and we can exchange answers. Or does anyone here in the room have the answer? And somebody may pipe up and share the answer. Done. Or if you commit to go back, But there's nothing worse, because someone in the room may have the answer. And if they've got the answer and you try to wing it and give a wrong answer, well, then you've lost absolutely, your credibility has just gone down the pan in that an answer. And the other thing I always say is to finish on a high, because there's nothing worse than if you get that difficult question. But I always say to them is, like, say, we're going to have 10 minutes of questions. So you have a time limit on it, so they know exactly. So if you do cut them off, it's not going, oh, why didn't they answer my question? It's kind of, but I always say, right, one more question. If that's a difficult question, or even if it's not, I have a question myself, which I then say at the end, oh, normally when I do this presentation on well-being or interview skills, whatever, I'm usually asked about, and I throw out my question, and then I have a ready-made answer, so I finish on a high, and that's what I tend to do, and then wrap it up. Yeah. But the other point on questions is, with a Q&A session, I always don't do my summary of my presentation until after the Q&A. So I say, right, we've got 5 minutes for questions, and then I'll wrap up the session. So again, I have a pre-prepared wrap up, which again, I have my Q&A, which I'm going to finish on my question. So I'm going to finish fairly confidently, and then I'm going to wrap up. And then that's what they leave, because sometimes the Q&A can get a bit kind of, it'll all fall apart if people lose interest because the presentation's over. But I then wrap up with my which is really, really effective.
Brilliant. Yeah. I think the other thing is, I found this when I first started doing sort of workshops, is sometimes you just look out and you'd see what looked like on the face of it, blank faces, sort of. And what I realized was actually these are people who are actually, they're just listening. They're not, when you first look out and you see all these, what initially look to you like the blank faces, you sort of think, oh God, people aren't getting me, they're not understanding me, etc., etc. But actually it isn't. It's just that they are listening. And as you get more experience, I find you can begin to tell the difference between sort of either sort of maybe a crowd that's getting a bit tired. So sometimes when I'm doing my workshops, it's a lot of energy stuff. So I can begin to see as we're getting on through it and realizing when it's wrapping it up time, because I can see they're sort of looking a bit exhausted, or you might need a break. So is there anything that you can sort of give us tips for people, or any sort of ideas for how either to spot that or how people can be relaxed when it initially looks like, oh my gosh, these are scary people who haven't tuned in, when actually they probably have?
Yeah, some of them are, you're right, totally engaged, and it's working the room. I mean, because when you start, there is a barrier between you and the audience, and it's up to you to close that barrier, to engage with them. But you're right. For example, any of my workshops, we have like coffee breaks. But I always say, if we like 10:30 is a coffee break, but if come 10:15, we're kind of flagging a bit. Should we do the coffee break now? It's a good time to stop here. But also, I always have energizers. So if we come back, or we finish at the subject and we're going to move on, we say, right, let's have an energizer. Now that may be just kind of a question, like a general knowledge question or something, or maybe a trick question, or maybe a little exercise. We stand up and we shake our arms about whatever. I always have a list of them, depending on how it's going. Is the room too warm? Just simple things. Is it too warm so we can open some windows? but it's being aware of that, yeah, because what you don't want is, people flagging and they just don't look interested. Because for you also, if your audience doesn't look interested, it's harder for you to do your job at your top performance if you're thinking nobody seems to care about this. So it's doing that, but it's asking, like, is everyone okay? Is everyone feel? Is the room temperature okay? Is everyone, or should we take a coffee break now and come back in 10 minutes? And if we need an extra coffee break at 11:30, let's have that as well. And in terms of questions, I always say, we go through the session and at the end I'll take questions. You've got to set out, because particularly on a workshop where you got to finish at 4 o'clock. One of your participants has a train at 4:15, so you got to finish on time. So it's almost, if you allow questions during this, it's up to you. And some people say, I'll take questions as we go through this. Others say, I'll take questions at the end. So if you hold any questions, keep them to the end and I'll answer them. So again, it's doing it. Sometimes questions can open it up because then people get involved and it becomes livelier. So you can do it that way. So it does vary, but absolutely, it's up to you as the facilitator to do something about if you feel the energy is waning in the room, because then they're not going to get the best out of it. And you're not going to perform to your best either if you kind of see them sitting there kind of, how long is a tea break or something. So it's absolutely. But I always have a number of them warm-ups or different little tasks that they can do, which they kind of enjoy as well, Or what I sometimes do, if it's presentation skills, I'll do impromptu speaking. So I'll say, right, let's have an impromptu speak, which is thinking on your feet. So I'll just give a subject, what's your favorite book? It's just a simple question is to get them to speak. It's not about their knowledge of the subject. It's about how they're going to hopefully coherently answer in a 1 minute, 2 minute answer. And people dread that, but the feedback's always, they probably got more out of the impromptu bit because they have to think on their feet. And you think about it, we do impromptu speaking all day in our lives. So be able to be better at that is better. But that's one way I do it, particularly. And I always have something for the after lunch, the graveyard slot, as they call it. I'll always have something to do. And sometimes it would be a impromptu speaking, depending on the workshop I'm doing. If it's presentation skills, impromptu speaking will feature during the day. When people give a presentation, they get feedback, and they would probably do a little bit. So, and it also means that they're all participating and they're all awake because, oh my God, I could be next to do an impromptu. Yeah. But it's having an army of things that you can do, to get it going. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely find that we learn better, or I certainly learn better if I'm involved in the sort of participation. If I'm just sat there, depends a little bit on the subject, but if I'm just sat there listening, then there's probably lots of stats about how much information we absorb. And I know there is about sort of how much verbally and all of that we tend to take in. So I do definitely find that, creating some sort of exercises for people to do, and like you say, just breaking it up so that, when you want to put those important messages in, they come through.
Exactly. And the other point is to be prepared. If for example, there's a whole day and you have slides, you've got a PowerPoint, you've got slides. If in the afternoon they say, oh, we're fed up with the PowerPoint slides, can you just talk to us? It's be prepared for that. Because what some people do, what I fear is when I say, how do you start the presentation? Oh, I get my slide deck out. You kind of think, oh gosh, or how do you do a sales presentation? Oh, I get the slide deck out. And they probably use it for every company instead of actually, say, okay, what do I want to say? What's my objective in this presentation? And then ask yourself, would PowerPoint enhance this presentation? But a lot of people think, oh yeah, and then you kind of see, sometimes at the bottom you see 1 of 100. I think, oh God, I'm in for a tough time here. This is going to be long and boring. Yeah. So it's but as I say, it's being prepared to say, if they say, yeah, we've had enough, or you kind of think, yeah, I'm too long at the slide. And also if you are using PowerPoint and like you put a slide up about a point and then you're talking, it's to blank the screen. So they're just focused on you, because sometimes they start looking at the thing and you've moved on from that. So it's actually just blank the screen until you're going to make your next point as well. Kind of keeps them more interested.
Yes, because some people are quite PowerPoint adverse, aren't they?
Oh God, yeah.
It's almost become a dreaded sort of scenario to turn up at some presentation and it's just full of PowerPoint. So I think it's got to be quite punchy, hasn't it?
Absolutely. The PowerPoint should only be enhancing. You are the focal point, whether you're using flip charts, props, or PowerPoint. They're not on stage all the time. You are the focal point. You've got to be the one driving the energy in the room. Yeah. But as I say, but PowerPoints can help. Don't get me wrong, but it's not having everything. It's not having everything on the screen. Then you're saying this because then you kind of think, but you could just hand out the PowerPoint slides. They could read and answer any questions. So it's just the key points perhaps on it. Very minimum on your PowerPoint. It's you who's giving all the information, and you're just enhancing. And if it doesn't need a PowerPoint, don't use it. But the number of people say, yeah, I go for my PowerPoint and I start my presentation. I think, have you thought about what your objective is? Have you thought about the structure? Have you thought about your audience? What's in it for them? Because all the time, any time you're doing a presentation, it's about your audience. What can I give them? I've got to add some value to, because they've turned up, they think I'm the expert in this subject. I've now got to give them some value in why they're here. And it's just basically, thinking about your structure as well. Do you have an opening? Do you have a body? Do you have an ending? And does it all flow together? And again, it's what topic, because when I'm kind of evaluating speeches, there's three things I look for. It's kind of what I saw, what I felt, and what I heard. And what I saw is the person when they just started, are they confident? Their gestures, how they looked, how they came across. What I felt, if they're, that made me feel sad, or it was emotionally, I became attached to it, or it was a lovely personal story they told, it was upsetting, or I was very happy, it was inspiring, or it was a call to action. Yeah, I get that. I'm going to go out and do what they've asked me to do. And then what I heard, how they put the whole thing together. Was there a nice structure? Was there a nice opening? How did they use pauses? Did they use any filler words? All of those things. And that's how I kind of bring if I'm giving feedback based on those three. Because, and I say, we all want the speaker to do well, but it's having the confidence to give the feedback as well. And that's what they get a lot of, because in our workshops, we ask the participants to give feedback as well. It's not just coming from me. I'm not the expert, because everyone has a view on how the presentation went. And again, that gives them an opportunity to talk, but to do it in a constructive way. So again, it's growing the confidence and actually thinking about speeches. Because I always say, when someone gives an evaluation on a speech, it's okay. We're not directing it at, like, Evan, you just gave a speech to say, like, Anne did this, Anne did that. But not only you get the feedback, everyone in the room gets the feedback. What Anne did there was really, really good. I'm going to take that away for myself. Or actually, I didn't like the way she did that. It worked for her, but I wouldn't be comfortable doing that. Or at the point of it, oh gosh, yeah. So it's doing things like that for everybody.
A term that you used the other day when we had a chat was commend, recommend, commend.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which was brilliant.
Yeah, well, in terms of feedback, the important thing is some people, they'll only pick holes in a presentation. What I always say is that there's two ways. There's one where, the person's worked hard, they've hopefully prepared, they've written the speech, they've practiced quite a lot, and they come along and they do the presentation, and then they're waiting for the feedback. The person stands up and absolutely just, gives off, very, very critical of it, picks out all the bad points, and constantly, you did this and you didn't do this, you should have done this. And the poor person sitting there thinking, well, I was a nervous wreck, and now I'm never going to do another presentation in my life. That's it, I'm finished, my career is over. So what we say, and the other one we say is to avoid is a whitewash, where everything's fantastic. Wow, that was the best speech I've heard. Wow, you look great. Oh, I loved it. Because when that person goes to write their next speech, they're going to say, okay, so what do I pick out from my last speech? Oh no, they said I was fantastic. So kind of there's no learning from it. But it's actually been, particularly for new people, it's actually been positive about it. And by doing that, we say, okay, the first thing you should say is something positive. Great speech, Anne. I loved your structure. Really, I could follow it. You had transition points, everything all the way through. Lovely. I thought to make that good speech better, if you could have pause more, particularly at your important points. And then that's your recommend, and then go back to a commend. And I love the way you brought in the personal stories. I love that, because personal stories are powerful stories. I thought that was excellent. So all in all, I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation, and I look forward to your next one. So it's nice and positive, and there's a takeaway as well. So again, I did that well, that's good. I did that well, and I need to work on my pausing for my next speech. Yeah. So it's being positive, absolutely, because the last thing you want for people who are particularly nervous and you want them to develop and grow in confidence is to, kind of eliminate their career before it even starts. So yeah, we say the way to think about it is commend, recommend, commend. Yeah. So it's in terms of when they're evaluating, absolutely.
Having that feedback. Something that I find is maybe quite a useful thing to do is to observe top speakers. So, you know, and it can be interesting as well, even just from an interest point of view. So, you know, we think of certain people as really good speakers, someone like Barack Obama, and just to sort of work out what it is about these people. Steve Jobs had a really great reputation as well. Absolutely. And it's seeing what they do that sort of captures the audience, isn't it? It's often about gestures, and it's about everything else that you've said, really. But passion as well, isn't it? Now, I know some subjects are not necessarily easy subjects to be passionate about. You know, often, for example, maybe someone who works in finance, maybe it's not appropriate to be passionate about certain things. You know, if they're talking through a portfolio or something, they have to be quite sort of regimented in that side of things. But if someone is passionate about something, it's so much easier, I think, to get the messages across. Like, if someone gets me on a roll with one of my subjects, whoa, I'm off on one. And, you know, the passion's just there naturally. But you don't want to lose that through your nerves, do you? Because it's such a great thing to have.
No, absolutely. But you talk about Barack Obama. I mean, I analyze his speeches, in fact, to have a look, because, and I always say to people that, you know, like, for example, what he uses in his speech quite a lot is the rule of three. So, you know, he'll always have things in three. He'd make 3 points because people remember things better. So he used that, I think it was 29 times in his 10-minute speech. He used it. And nobody said, oh, he's using the rule of three too often. And I always say to my participants in workshops is you'll start to learn when you watch people, you start, oh God, they're using the rule of three. But you don't ever come away and think, that was a great speech. He used the rule of three 4 times or something. Sometimes you're not sure why it was such a good speech. You know, I felt inspired. The structure was great. But it's because they're using all the techniques, like, as I say, like for Barack Obama, it was the rule of three. Now, for example, J.F. Kennedy, going back in time, he didn't use that very often at all. But they all have their own techniques. But it's powerful. If anybody wants to have my analysis, they're welcome to have it if they get in touch. Not a problem. But it's just how they construct the speech that they come and how it then comes across. It's fantastic. And there are different techniques, but his one was the rule of three. He used it constantly. And of course, the rule of three is like, if you think about the fairy tales, you know, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you know, 3 blind mice, even in religion, faith, hope, and charity, or even the strap lines. Marketing people are so desperate to get 3 words in their strap line, like Nike, just do it. ChangEnable, together you can. So it's because it's so memorable for that. But it's if you think about currently Brexit, get Brexit done, take back control. So those 3 words, it's and to be able to use that in your speech, like making 3 points, even for speeches, is to make 3 points and then build on the 3 points. But it's a very, very effective. And you're right, people use different techniques to bring together a really good speech. So there's lots that goes into a good speech, all the techniques that they use. And as I say, some would favor the rule of three, others favor. There's different techniques that they use. And also, you sometimes when you go to, you may use it. Some people say, oh, this morning on the train, I saw this. Now, they wrote that 6 weeks ago and they've been practicing it, but it just seems personal when they bring it in. Yeah, oh, this morning on the train, or when I was driving in the car this morning, you know, as I said, it's been typed up 6 months ago or 6 weeks ago, and they've been practicing that, but it just sounds more personable doing it that way.
Yeah. And again, I think it depends a bit, again, on the subject, but very often the other thing people I find relate to is those personal stories. So if people are able to bring those in, again, like I say, it does depend very much on what the presentation is about. But, you know, if you can relate it to you, it makes you appear more human. It makes people relate to you better. It might be that then they have some sort of empathy with you, or they realize you've got empathy with them, which is really important. So bringing in those sort of personal stories or sort of analogies and metaphors, because that's how the brain works, isn't it? The brain's great with that sort of information. It can relate to it and it's memorable then, isn't it?
Definitely. Oh yeah, personal stories are powerful. Absolutely. If you can bring in a personal story. In fact, in Toastmasters, the international world international, they're clubs, speaker clubs, but their contests, their world champion contests, most of them will have a personal story in it. And it'll be about how they started off. Like, for example, if we take developing a speech, I couldn't put two words together. I couldn't stand in front of three people and speak, blah, blah, blah. I then went on this journey and they end up being the fantastic speaker, and the kind of the transformation in them. They're always, always very effective in the Toastmaster world of becoming world champion. If anyone goes on and looks at the YouTube and picks out Toastmaster world champion speeches, 99% of them will have a personal story in it. It's kind of how they got from A to B and wow, how it transformed their life. But you're right, people love, you know, what kind of nosy people really aren't we as people, but people love personal stories. And as I say, they are powerful. They really come across well in a speech, you know, rather than say, my friend, you know, my friend is kind of, you know, when I was, or this happened to me just last week. Absolutely, yeah. People connect so much quicker with a personal story. Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing with particularly sort of, you know, presentations to like an audience is one of the things that I've been conscious of when I've done that is the eye contact thing, because what I found myself naturally getting drawn to is that friendly face. And then I've sort of thought, you know, then consciously thought, oh my gosh, I'm only looking at this one person and I've completely ignored people at either side. So then I consciously look there, but I'm still naturally drawn to the friendly face. Is there any advice you can give around that?
Yeah, everyone says that. You're right. Particularly if somebody's sitting in the audience and they're going like that.
Yeah.
You love it. You think, oh, wow, I'm saying the right thing. This person's connected. But you know, you do have to, as I say, before you even start, you stand in front of a group and you take them all in. So you look at them all, big smile, your arms out, palms up, which is an open, welcoming gesture, but take them all in. And as you speak, it's actually, you know, almost living in each person's eyes for about 20 seconds. I mean, not the complete, I mean, I'm conscious now, I keep looking at you, not the camera. I'm thinking, should I be looking at the cameras? Well, as this is conversational, I keep looking to you. But you're right, it's actually making sure that you take in everybody, even the person who probably suddenly takes out the phone or, you know, is fiddling or whatever. After you take in the audience, you must go around the room the whole, not like Wimbledon, you know, it's not kind of, I've got to look at everybody, so I'm going to look at everybody and kind of, you know, then, but my gosh, you know, my head's going to fall off and it's irritating to people. But it's spending a few moments with each person, and it's not just going back to that person. You know, if someone kind of sitting like that, you think, oh God, they're switched off, they're bored, or they're whatever. It's continuing, and you're never going to get the whole room engaged. So my advice is always work on the 95% who are engaged, and don't worry about the 5%, because your energy shouldn't be with them. Go with the majority who are there and who are getting lots from that. But at the same time, if someone is, you still have to give them the eye connection equally as to the person who's and smiling and thumbs up, and you kind of think it's great. It's like, for example, in the when I just referring back to the Q&A session, for example, if somebody, say on the right hand side of the room, keeps asking questions, you know, you've got to be polite. But then a good way then to kind of think about, just I'm now fed up with this person asking all these questions. You can answer them that, but it's just almost a one-to-one. It's to almost block them, you know, politely just go across and say, okay, so we've heard lots of questions from this side of the room. Are there any from this side of the room? You're kind of cutting them off politely. And what tends to happen, particularly if they're constantly asking questions, somebody will ask a question on the other side of the room just to kind of keep them quiet. But you've politely done it. You know, you've switched them off, but you've done it politely, not kind of, you know, you've asked 5 questions, for God's sake, give us a break, you know. So it's just doing that. But you're right, eye contact is absolutely so important. And of course, when people start, they don't make eye contact. They look up in the sky, they look around, they look down on the lectern, they look at the notes or whatever it is. But it's that eye contact is engaging with it. You're connecting with the audience. So it's so important. Yeah, absolutely.
And talking about notes, even if you have notes, and as you say, maybe in that first presentation or first couple of presentations, you might want to read from your notes, but it's making that point of looking up as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I personally, I mean, some people say, oh, get rid of the notes and stand out from behind the lecture, which, yeah, you will come across much better. But if you kind of have that comfort where you need your notes, but it's been so, again, it gets back to preparation. They can just look at it, and you don't need to read the whole sentence. As long as you look, oh, make eye contact. I've got to make eye contact. So it's important that we make eye contact, you know, so you're not just head down the whole time. It's just a kind of a help to get you through the structure of it. So you glance at it and then you're able to talk about that point, you know, without just reading it. Absolutely. But it's how you manage notes. Absolutely. Because as I said earlier, a read speech is a dead speech. You know, the head down, there's absolutely no connection with the audience. Yeah. I mean, some people hold cards in their hands.
Yes,
that's what they're comfortable with. Of course, it restricts their gestures. So, you know, it's kind of, so there's lots of ways, but as I say, you've got to feel comfortable doing it. If you need notes, use your notes, and then perhaps start to move, just have little cue cards, and then perhaps you just go away from any notes, any type of notes, but it's what they're comfortable with. You want to come in and say, right, the next speech you're doing, Anne, is no notes. And you go, oh, I don't see you there. You don't turn up in 2 weeks' time because there's no way I'm doing that with notes. So again, it's every individual, you know, you give them different goals and different objectives because we're all individual and how we react to that, yeah, and how we in fact react to change, yeah. I think you want to talk about, sorry, go on.
There's just one more question in my mind. As we go through this, I keep thinking of questions for you. If somebody doesn't have notes, and you know, it's happened to me doing these chats with people where I call it a brain fart, you know, where you might have an idea or you might be in the flow and then it's like your brain conks out.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any advice that you would give someone who's, you know, in that moment that they're doing their main presentation, they've got their audience, and then they just lose their flow? Is there anything you would say to them? Is there any advice you could give for that?
The problem is, it's easy to say this, but don't panic. But it's easy to say that. But I mean, it happened to me in London, and I think it was in front of about 500 people. And it was different workshops. I was doing the workshop just after lunch. But in the morning, there was a fantastic workshop, and I got completely engrossed in the workshop. Then kind of had to run out and grab a bit of lunch. I stood up on my stage, 500 people all there. I started and suddenly went blank, completely blank. And I just said, oh, forgive me. And I just had to kind of go through my thoughts and get going again. You know, I mean, I could have had my notes in my pocket if I wanted to. I could have had them on the lectern if I wanted to. I was kind of comfort, but I was kind of thinking, no, this is a session where I've got to stand up, no notes, and get out there. But I mean, but people don't mind that. You know, it's kind of, it's not the panic. It's kind of people aren't saying, oh my God, he's forgotten what he's going to say, and they all switch off and grab their coats and leave. But it's kind of in control. Oh, apologies, I've just lost my train of thought for a moment. But it's, you know, it's not easy, particularly if you're a novice speaker, when that happens. But again, if you're a novice speaker, people would be rooting for you anyhow. But it's just to kind of think, or people may say, do you want to have a look at your notes? Or if you have your notes, just refer to your notes. Excuse me, I just need to look at my notes. Or what some people do, they put the lectern, say, to the right of their stage, and they put the notes on it. So kind of, I know my notes are there. So if I do fall apart, I can just refer to my notes, you know, and casually walk over to your notes, have a brief look, and go again. But it does happen, and it probably will happen all of us. But it's kind of, as I say, not to panic. I just try to get your train of thought going again. But it's not a nice feeling, but how you learn from it.
Yeah, and I think it's knowing you're not the only person that it happens to, as you say.
Oh, absolutely.
You'll get that. And depending also, I think maybe on the environment, you might be able to have just a little joke about it. You know, it depends on what the situation is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, for example, oh, I didn't do this last night when I rehearsed the speech. My God, I don't know what's happened. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perhaps red wine does work when you're doing a speech.
Yeah.
Something like that. Absolutely. Yeah. Show your human side as well. That is.
Yeah, that's it. Because again, I think it's the presentation is as much about people relating to you as it is the information that you're giving out, isn't it? If you don't like the person who's doing the speaking, then you're probably going to turn off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there has to be, you're right, there has to be that connection. And you're right, when people come to me for their CV preparation or mock interviews, I always say, if you feel we're not gelling, I'm happy to say thanks, but no thanks, and find someone else. I don't have a problem with that, because it is about, and I know even though, you know, you go to an interview and you probably won't gel with that person, but if that's your employer, you may think about, do I want to work for this person? And it's really exploring that. But I'm happy to say, yeah, if we feel that there isn't that connection, because having the connection definitely helps in terms of the relationship and what the output they get from it. So absolutely, yeah. And you're right, some speakers, oh gosh, not him. I've heard him before, he's so boring. And the problem is when people say so-and-so is boring, it's their voice. That's what it is, really. It's their voice. They're probably speaking in a monotonous tone. So people go, oh my God, he's just talking like that. I'm going to switch off. Where if they vary the pitch and the pace of the voice, you know, they change. Like the person's personality changes almost. But it's not them. It's their voice. You know, it's like I always say, you know, if your boring old uncle comes to visit and he's telling the story, you're all sitting there being polite. The kids get up and run away. Unfortunately, we can't do that. So we've got to kind of, you know, pretend we're there, but we tune out. You know, you think about it, kids just gone, oh, it's him, it's the boring uncle, and off they go. So it's kind of, you know, so it's been actually, you've got to be engaging with your presentations, yeah, and how you come across again at interviews as well, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, you see the eyes glaze over, and it's not a good thing.
Yeah. And there's nothing worse to say, right? For the next 40 minutes, I'm going to talk about it. Oh my God.
It's fine if they're talking about sending you to sleep, then they'll probably do a good job.
Yeah, and again, talking about the children, if you think about it, you know, children never said, oh, can you do a PowerPoint, Daddy, please? Give us a PowerPoint, you know? Or if you're telling a story and, you know, you're not being animated about the story, they're not interested, aren't they? You know, you've got to be animated. And it's the same with you. If you think about, you know, relating that to your presentation, you've got to be animated. You've got to vary your voice. You've got to look interested. You know, if you're not interested, if you don't look interested in your subject and passionate about it, well, how do you expect your audience to be passionate and interested in the subject?
Yeah, it's bringing energy into it, isn't it?
Definitely,
you know, definitely. Those speakers who are good at doing that, again, they connect better with you.
Definitely, absolutely.
Yeah. So one other thing that you very kindly said you talk about is a little bit on sort of confidence and well, you know, one of my key subjects at the moment is men's mental health. And, you know, as I said at the very beginning, confidence underpins so many issues for, well, you know, for all of us, you know, whether someone's got some, you know, anxiety or, as I say, depression, and obviously with the area you're working in. And, you know, we talk about men's mental health and we talk about it's okay not to be okay. But through my work, I would say that I still quite strongly believe that men are still holding back, you know, that they're not really communicating as a general, you know, we can only ever really generalize, but I think there's still a great fear in men to sort of admit that maybe they're not okay, to show any chinks in their armor. And obviously it links in with confidence, because confidence is a big part of that. You know, I'm not confident to do that. Is that something that you might see in your work, or you just notice in daily life as a guy? It's really good to have you here. What's your perspective on this?
And I would agree with that. Yeah, people like, you know, kind of macho style. I can't say I'm stressed. Or, you know, if I can't go sick and say, yeah, I'm stressed, or, you know, I think I'm having a breakdown, or whatever. Absolutely. That's still isn't. I think it's getting better. I think there's a much more of awareness. I think there's a lot of help out there, like the likes of yourself, who can help people, and people kind of, you know, because as I always say, you know, even when they come to me about interviews or CV preparation, it's confidential. You know, no matter what you tell me, it's going to go nowhere. Even if they're recommended through a friend, you know, if you recommend one and say, oh, Anne, oh yeah, she's, you know, she's got a problem about her. Did you hear about, you know, absolutely nothing. I always tell them straight away, you know, whatever you tell me, I take it to the grave almost. You know, there's no sharing of it. But you're right. I think with mental health, it's for example, if you talk about redundancy, for example, using redundancy as an example, I mean, there's when people are made redundant, the first thing they should really do is tell the whole world. Now, I find that, you know, if like women tend to do that better than men. Men will close up, you know, oh my gosh, I've lost my job. Because for us, you know, in a lot of, if you think about it, you go out on a Saturday night, you go to a party, people say, what do you do? You don't say, oh, I'm married with 3 children and I love ski boarding and I go to France every year, my holidays, I love it. It's about your job. So we kind of have that as our identity. So of course, when particularly a man, when they lose their job, they almost lose their identity. So of course they go in on themselves instead of telling the whole world, I'm available for work, you know, I'm available, I'll be finishing up on the end of March. Please get in touch. I'll send you my CV, blah, blah, blah. And there's it's called the Kubler-Ross Model. It's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, back in, I think it was 1969. She wrote a book. It was really about dealing with the grief of being terminally ill. That's what it essentially was. And then they kind of moved on, and it was found that the emotional cycle, it's just it's called a 5 grief cycle, 5 stages of grief. But the emotional element of it, they saw in the ensuing years, was actually, you know, other people could be affected by this, by bad news, such as job loss. So there's this kind of, you know, this, and the 5 stages, I'll just quickly go through them, is denial. I can't have lost my job. Absolutely no way. You know, and they kind of pretend the process isn't happening. You know, it couldn't happen to me. So they kind of, you know, that's that. I'll be retained. I'll be retrained in a new role. Everything will be fine. I'm okay. And then there's the anger. They move to the anger then. Oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing this to me. You know, so the anger is usually directed at the company or just even the manager who's bore the bad news. But it can impact family and friends, because suddenly, you know, the man of the house, if you like, and thinking in terms of that, goes home and he's not going to be able to pay the mortgage or put food on the table. So, you know, it's absolutely blaming everybody. And then there's the bargaining. So there's kind of reluctant to let go. So you have the bargaining stage. Now, you know, if only I could talk to my manager, I always got on with him. I'm sure he can do something for me. I'll give you a new job. I'll be okay. And then, of course, there's, you know, your area, if you like, depression. You know, what's the point in carrying on? Oh my God, I've nothing, you know, I've lost control. It's the loss of control that really hits and go into depression. So it's kind of trying to get their identity back. Remember I talked earlier about, you know, the job is their identity. So suddenly, you know, they've no worth in life because their identity is gone. But then from that, there's the acceptance. Okay, this has happened. I've lost my job. I need to move on. That door is closed. I need now to open another door. So to begin finally to look forward. Now that process, those 5 stages, I mean, not everyone goes through them, and some will miss a stage. You know, they'll just suddenly go straight into depression, or some will be in anger for a long time. And it's not linear either, you know, so it's not kind of 2 weeks, you'll be here 2 weeks. For some people, job, fantastic. I hated that job. I'm glad they've made me redundant. I'm now going to get a new job. My life's going to be wonderful. So it does vary. But and the same with anger is of course, if you're in an anger state because you're giving so much to the company, you then go for an interview. The last thing you want to talk about is your anger. You know, you've got to show you've moved on, you're a positive candidate, because some people go and they say, oh yeah, they absolutely treated me awful, blah, blah, blah. Because they're thinking, oh my gosh, do I really want this candidate in my organization? So you've got to move on from that and certainly not display any anger. Just, you know, say you've got to show how much a good candidate you are, if you like, rather than, you know, be anger. So the depression, and again, you know, people can get depression, but it's actually then, okay, what do I need to do about this? You know, I'm really, really feeling bad. It's to talk to people. But again, a lot of people don't. You know, people don't even know they've been made, they only go back when they found another job. Oh, I didn't know you changed jobs. Oh yeah, I changed jobs 3 months ago. But it's actually the time to tell everyone is when because you'll be making connections with people. But what happens, you close in on yourself and you don't tell anyone. You're just with your family, you're going, how am I going to pay the mortgage? But if people are contacting you, say, oh, send me your CV, I think someone's interested. You know, you're having that connection, you're having those conversations, but too many people do just close in and then realize, actually, I do now have to get on with my life. And this, you know, as I say, the likes of your role comes in to help these people, where some people, you know, they just can't deal with it themselves. It's actually saying, I need help with this, you know, and help me here. Let's go through this. But others will come through it. And others, as I said, they'll be absolutely fantastic. They just didn't have the confidence to leave the company and look for a new job. But now that it's happened, they're almost glad because they've now found a new job and life is even better than it was in the past. So absolutely, discussing and sharing your problems, if you like, and the issues can bring clarity. You know, having an independent conversation with you, for example, it brings you clarity and enables you to move forward with a plan. So absolutely, it's but change isn't just about loss, of course. You know, we talk about change. I mean, people go on holidays because the change is as good as a rest. You know, people fear change in the organization, and for some people, they think it's losing the job, it's losing control of what they do, and they're in control of their little job. If people change it, maybe it's going to be, you know, IT are going to bring in a new way of doing things. My gosh, you know, I've always done it this way. But losing a job can be an opportunity to reevaluate as well. Like, do you want to stay in the same job? or you want to set up your own business, or it's actually a time to reflect on that. And sometimes with someone like yourself or myself as a career coach, is to go through those processes and find out, so it does vary. As I say, individuals will react. Some will go through some time in there, some will just go 1 or 2 stages, others will hit depression and get stuck in there for quite a while, but others will absolutely it won't even affect them at all. It's almost kind of something that they're glad has happened. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
As you say, it can be an opportunity, and because of the age we live in now, no jobs are guaranteed. You rarely get a job for life. And also it's so much easier now to retrain. Now, we've got online opportunities to retrain. We do have much easier access to, well, when we're not in lockdowns and what have you, but much better access generally to travel if we wanted to travel. So there's such a wide range of courses. I mean, even if you look now at what they do in uni compared to back in the day when I was younger, the range of courses and opportunities is immense. So it really is a wonderful opportunity, really. And you do often see people later in life now changing career. Is that something you see a lot in your role?
Oh, definitely. A lot of people come in. I do outplacement service as well. When people lose their job, we go in, and first we just talk to them about how you're feeling. If they really feel bad, get it all out on the table. Now is the time to, have the confessional, really feel if you're feeling really bad. Some are so angry. So it's kind of, okay, let's have all this anger. But then it's moving, almost, if you like, moving through the grief cycle. I mean, they're not going to do that in a day, but at least if they're getting it off the chest, is then saying, okay, we need an action plan now. And for some people, it's, I hated my job. I didn't realize how much I hated it. I want to do something completely different. Others, when they explore it, so we go through that, others will explore and say, well, actually, I'm on £100,000. If I change jobs, I'm only on 40 and I can't afford that. So is it really an option? But at least they're exploring it. For others, it's, I want to do something completely different. And they train, and they may go to a new job and a reduced salary. But in terms of the kind of life they have and their well-being, it's so much better. Yeah, so we take them, and we'd always have them, lead them with a plan. So we'd go through the CV, make sure the CV is okay. And then kind of think, okay, so what sort of job we're looking for. But then we'd make them build a plan, kind of a weekly and daily. So what are you going to do today? How many employers are you going to contact? Or is it a course? When are you going to sign up for this course you're talking about, and take them right through? But you're right, so many people now, when made redundant, thinking, I'm not sure I really want to go back in and do what I wanted. I mean, I had a guy, you talked about finance earlier. He was finance all his life. And he wasn't made redundant. He just felt, I'm just so fed up with it, he says. It's the same thing for the last 20 years. I want to go into charity work. I want to do some charity work. So that's what we explored with him then. Okay, so they're all. And when he moved on, his life was absolutely wonderful. Even he said his wife and everything thought he was just a new man. And it's because he finally so he'd spoken to someone and said, they had moved on to a new role. And he was saying, I'm so unhappy, blah, blah, blah. And he said, you need to do something about it. And in fairness, he did, and his life has been transformed. But you're right, there's a lot of change in career. And you're right, like 20, 30, 40 years ago, perhaps, people would join a company and stay there until they retire. That doesn't happen now. And in fact, people who move every 2 or 3 years are better candidates because they've experienced different cultures and different organizations. So they're actually a better candidate than someone who's said 10 years or they're made redundant. You're only here because you've been made redundant. Now, that's not to put them off, because if they're a good candidate, they will take their skills. But it is different. Today's world is so different. And you're right, they change jobs, not just organizations, but job roles, the functions they do, or completely move away from it. So it is absolutely, the world is out there. It's kind of exploring it and then kind of making a plan and getting on with it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Getting back to what we started with, having the confidence to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I always think it's you have a better life if you can fulfill a role that you're passionate about. That's not maybe something that everybody does. It's probably something that we can all do, but you might have to make other lifestyle adjustments to do that for some people. And as you say, if someone's on 100k a year and they drop to 40 to do their passion, they might think, actually, I'd rather the 100k a year. But it's a choice.
Exactly.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
So,
I always say it's going through the sausage machine. You know, put yourself through the trustmanship, whatever falls out at the end, if you're happy with that, if that's staying in the job for 100K, okay, at least you've gone through the process and you think, yeah, I'm happy to stay as I am, absolutely. Rather than just going, oh, this is awful. But you know, you actually go through a process of exploring and thinking at the end of the day, no, I can't, you know, I've got 17 children, I've got a support, I've got a mortgage support, I couldn't take the hit now. So I'm on it, but at least I've thought about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think sausage machine is a great way to end our chat.
Okay.
It's a very memorable way to end our chat. So how can people contact you? I think you've got a website, haven't you?
I've got a website, ChangEnable, www.changeenable.com. Go on that if they want to contact me. If they do, I also I won't. What's the word? I'm lost for word. I won't kind of be sending out emails every week, but if you want to sign up my emails, I send useful tips and things, but it's only periodically, so it's not and obviously you can unsubscribe anytime. But if they want to know more about anything we've talked about today, you'd obviously contact you or me. Happy to engage with people. But yeah, ChangEnable.com on the website.
And also you have 2 books as well, don't you? You've got one in the background there.
I've got one in the background, and interesting enough, if I take it. Interesting enough, this is available on Amazon. It's available on Amazon. It's also on my website. But in it, as we just to summarize what we've been talking about, it talks about kind of, you know, why go through the pain of becoming a presenter, because everyone's so nervous about it. But it's like, you know, it adds a useful skill to your life set. Become more confident and have greater self-belief. And that absolutely comes through for everyone who does go through the process of becoming a better speaker. You know, there's all the things. Become a better listener. We become a better listener because we're listening about trying to evaluate people. But it's I would just end with it. Yeah, become more confident, have a greater self-belief. I think. Yeah, I've also done a cookbook, which is you can't see that really. Yeah, there it is. Again, that's on Amazon, and it's not just simply a cookbook. It's a collection of recipes from people in the south of Italy. And also the area of Italy, it talks about the places and the people, the cultures in the south of Italy, which is a very, funny enough, Greek influence. So there's lots of delicious recipes in there, but it's also, if you want to explore the south of Italy, it's an excellent book to do. So thank you for allowing me to share that with your audience. Yeah, and they're both available on Amazon.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love the idea of especially your cookbook. It just seemed a bit, when I first saw that, I thought, well, that's a bit random, someone who does presentation skills. But then when you've explained it, it makes a lot of sense. It's somewhere where you spent time and got those recipes. So I think that's lovely.
Yeah, we spend our summers down there. And I, to be honest with you, I started a couple of years ago, and it was just kind of, my gosh, this food that if you like, the locals serve, it's just so good. You know, the world's got to know about these. So I take no ownership of any of the recipes. I'm just sharing them with the people. So if you like Italian food, it's the go-to book.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time, Patrick. And it's been really good connecting with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.